If you enjoyed this audiobook, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. Sharing it with your friends and family helps spread knowledge. And when we help others grow, we grow too. Thank you so much for listening. Let's dive into the book. Chapter 1. The Language of Connection. Part 1. Words that Build Bridges. When Warren Buffett received a handwritten note from a young employee simply saying, "Your advice on patience helped me make my first smart investment decision," he kept that letter on his desk for months. That 20-word message did more to strengthen their professional relationship than dozens of quarterly reports could have achieved. The words we choose in our daily interactions carry extraordinary weight, yet most of us drastically underestimate their impact. Research from the University of California shows that positive verbal feedback triggers the same neural pathways as receiving money, while criticism activates our brain's threat detection system faster than physical danger. John Gottman's decades of relationship research revealed something remarkable about successful couples. They maintain a magic ratio of 5 positive interactions for every negative one. This isn't just about romantic partnerships. Teams at Google that follow similar patterns of positive verbal reinforcement consistently outperform those focused primarily on problem-solving and criticism. Consider how Dale Carnegie transformed his own struggling relationships by shifting from pointing out flaws to genuinely appreciating others' efforts. When he started acknowledging his colleagues' contributions before addressing concerns, his influence and effectiveness multiplied. The principle seems almost too simple, yet Carnegie documented case after case where this approach rebuilt damaged professional and personal connections. The science behind appreciation reveals why this works. When we hear specific, genuine praise, our brains release oxytocin and dopamine, creating what psychologists call an emotional deposit. These deposits accumulate over time, building resilience that helps relationships weather inevitable storms. The key lies in specificity. Instead of saying, "Good job," "Try your patience with that difficult client yesterday," showed real professionalism. Instead of "Thanks for helping," say, "When you stayed late to finish that report, it meant I could present confidently this morning." These precise acknowledgments demonstrate genuine attention and create memorable moments. Brené Brown's vulnerability research shows that authentic appreciation requires courage. We risk seeming overly sentimental or having our words dismissed. Yet her studies consistently demonstrate that people who express genuine appreciation report deeper, more satisfying relationships across all areas of life. The multiplicative effect happens because appreciated people naturally become more generous with their own words. They start noticing and acknowledging others, creating positive spirals that strengthen entire social networks. What begins as one person choosing better words ripples outward, transforming workplace cultures, family dynamics, and friendships. Your next conversation is an opportunity to make someone's day measurably better. The question isn't whether your words matter, but whether you'll choose ones that build bridges or maintain distance. Part 2. Listening with your heart. When Michael Jordan retired from basketball the first time, he received thousands of letters. Sports Illustrated writer Jack McCallum noticed something remarkable. Jordan's assistant didn't just sort them into fan mail piles. She read each one carefully, and Jordan actually responded to many personally. Years later, those letter writers still talked about receiving a handwritten note from their hero. The difference wasn't in Jordan's words. It was in the fact that someone actually listened to theirs. Most of us think we're good listeners, but research by psychologist Ralph Nichols reveals that immediately after listening to someone, we typically remember only half of what they said. Within 8 hours, that drops to just 25%. The problem isn't our memory, it's that we're not actually listening in the first place. Real listening requires what psychologists call emotional presence. When your spouse tells you about their difficult day, your first instinct might be to offer solutions or share your own similar experience. But relationship researcher John Gottman found that couples who stay together master something simpler. They turn toward each other with full attention. No phone checking, no mental grocery list making, no preparing your response while they're still talking. Consider how Oprah Winfrey built her media empire. Her secret wasn't asking brilliant questions. It was in how she listened to the answers. Watch any interview and you'll notice her eyes never leave her guest's face. She leans forward. She nods at the right moments. When someone shares something painful, she doesn't rush to fill the silence or move to the next topic. She lets the emotion land. Guests frequently said they felt heard in ways they'd never experienced on television. This kind of listening creates what attachment researchers call felt safety. When people sense you're truly present, their nervous system actually relaxes. They share more deeply. They trust more readily. The conversation shifts from surface-level exchange to genuine connection. The technique is surprisingly straightforward. Reflect back what you hear, not just the facts, but the feelings underneath. Instead of "so you had a bad meeting," try "it sounds like you felt really frustrated when your ideas were dismissed." This isn't parroting. It's emotional validation. You're confirming that their experience matters and makes sense. Brené Brown's research on vulnerability shows that shame thrives in silence but cannot survive empathy. When someone shares their struggle and you respond with genuine presence rather than immediate advice, you're offering one of the most powerful gifts possible: the experience of being truly known. Your listening creates the space where connection can grow. In a world of constant distraction, your full attention becomes a profound act of love. Part 3. Making people feel valued. When Maya walked into her favorite coffee shop after landing her first job at 23, the barista remembered not just her usual order, but asked about the interview she'd mentioned weeks earlier. That 30-second interaction made her feel more valued than the congratulatory texts from friends who'd known her for years. Why? Because someone had listened carefully enough to remember what mattered to her, then cared enough to follow up. John Gottman's research reveals that relationships need a magic ratio of 5 positive interactions to every negative one to thrive. But it's not about quantity alone. It's about quality attention. The barista hadn't just heard Maya's words. She'd absorbed the significance behind them and created what Gottman calls a bid for connection. The deepest human need isn't to be impressive or successful. It's to feel genuinely seen. Gary Chapman's decades of relationship counseling show that people interpret value differently. Some need words of affirmation, others physical touch or acts of service. The key lies in paying attention to how someone naturally expresses appreciation, then mirroring that language back to them. Consider how Oprah Winfrey built her media empire. She didn't just interview celebrities. She remembered details from previous conversations, asked follow-up questions about their children's graduations or recovery journeys, and made each person feel like the only guest who mattered. Her technique wasn't complex. She practiced what Dale Carnegie called becoming genuinely interested in other people. Small gestures create outsized impact when they demonstrate genuine attention. Remembering someone's birthday without Facebook reminders, asking about their mother's surgery 3 weeks later, celebrating their promotion with specific praise about the skills that earned it. These moments work because they prove you've been paying attention to their world. Sue Johnson's attachment research shows that feeling valued requires both emotional safety and genuine recognition. When someone shares good news, researcher Shelley Gable found 4 possible responses. Only one builds connection: active and constructive celebration. Instead of hijacking their moment with your own story or minimizing their achievement, you amplify their joy with enthusiasm and specific questions. The most powerful validation often comes through the smallest details. When Steve Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, he reportedly remembered employees' project details from months earlier, making each person feel their work mattered to the company's future. This wasn't manipulation, it was genuine investment in their contributions. Making someone feel valued requires one crucial shift: moving from self-focused listening to other-focused curiosity. Instead of waiting for your turn to speak, you become genuinely fascinated by their perspective, dreams, and daily experiences. This transformation from audience to active participant in their story creates the foundation for every meaningful relationship you'll ever build. Part 4. Choosing kindness every day. When researcher Barbara Fredrickson studied thousands of micro-interactions between strangers, she discovered something remarkable. A genuine smile held for just 3 seconds increased the recipient's positive emotions for up to 6 hours afterward. Yet most of us treat kindness like a limited resource, rationing it for special occasions rather than recognizing it as an infinite well that deepens with use. The Gottman Institute's 4-decade study of relationships revealed that couples who maintain a 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative interactions during conflict stay together. But here's what surprised researchers most. These positive moments weren't grand gestures. They were simple choices: bringing coffee without being asked, laughing at a partner's joke, or saying thank you for taking out the trash. The couples who thrived had turned everyday kindness into muscle memory. Consider how Southwest Airlines built its culture around this principle. When Herb Kelleher was CEO, he instituted a simple practice. Employees were encouraged to perform one unexpected act of kindness for a colleague daily. Flight attendants left encouraging notes for pilots after difficult flights. Gate agents brought coffee to overwhelmed customer service representatives. This wasn't corporate policy. It was intentional culture creation through micro-kindnesses that cost nothing but transformed workplace relationships. The neuroscience behind this makes perfect sense. When we witness or receive kindness, our brains release oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone. But here's the fascinating part. Performing acts of kindness triggers the same chemical response in our own brains. Dr. Sonia Lyubomirsky's research at UC Riverside found that people who performed 5 acts of kindness in one day experienced a significant boost in happiness that lasted weeks. But maintaining consistent kindness during stress requires strategy. Marriage researcher Dr. Sue Johnson discovered that couples who stay kind during conflict use what she calls emotional regulation techniques. Before responding to criticism, they pause and ask themselves, "What does my partner need right now?" rather than, "How can I defend myself?" The challenge isn't understanding kindness. It's choosing it when you're running late, frustrated, or disappointed. Viktor Frankl, reflecting on his experiences in Nazi concentration camps, wrote that even in humanity's darkest moments, people could choose their response to circumstances. Some prisoners shared their last piece of bread with others, proving that kindness remains a choice even under extreme duress. Start small. Tomorrow, choose one person in your life and perform a single act of unexpected kindness. Notice how it changes not just their day, but your own perspective on the relationship. Kindness, like compound interest, grows exponentially when practiced consistently. Chapter 2. Understanding Ourselves and Others. Part 1. What are you really looking for? Most people enter relationships knowing exactly what they don't want. They've memorized the red flags, compiled mental lists of deal breakers, and can recite horror stories from past experiences. Yet when asked what they actually do want, they fall surprisingly silent. This gap between avoiding pain and pursuing fulfillment explains why so many relationships feel unsatisfying even when nothing is technically wrong. Dr. Gary Chapman spent decades counseling couples before identifying a crucial pattern. Partners who seemed perfectly matched on paper often felt emotionally disconnected because they were speaking different love languages. One person showed love through acts of service, preparing elaborate meals and maintaining a spotless home, while their partner yearned for words of affirmation and felt unloved despite the obvious effort. Both were giving generously, but missing the mark entirely. This mismatch reveals a deeper truth about human connection. We tend to give others what we ourselves want to receive, assuming our needs are universal. The husband who brings flowers believes he's being romantic because he would feel loved receiving such a gesture. Meanwhile, his wife, who values quality time, interprets the quick flower delivery as a substitute for genuine attention. Neither is wrong, but both end up frustrated. Research from the Gottman Institute shows that successful couples share a fundamental trait. They've done the hard work of articulating their emotional needs clearly, not just to their partner, but to themselves. They can explain why physical touch matters more than expensive gifts, or why feeling heard during conflicts trumps being proven right. This clarity didn't happen by accident. It required honest self-reflection and often uncomfortable conversations with themselves. Consider what drives you in relationships. Do you crave security and predictability, feeling most loved when your partner follows through consistently? Or does adventure energize you, with spontaneous gestures and new experiences fueling your connection? Perhaps recognition motivates you, feeling seen and appreciated for your unique contributions. Maybe it's emotional intimacy, those late-night conversations where guards come down completely. The challenge isn't just identifying these needs, but understanding their origins. Our relationship patterns often trace back to childhood experiences and family dynamics. Someone who grew up in a chaotic household might prioritize stability above all else, while another person raised with criticism might desperately need verbal encouragement. These patterns aren't character flaws. They're adaptive responses that made perfect sense in their original context. What happens when you get clear about your authentic desires rather than defaulting to what you think you should want? You stop chasing relationships that look good from the outside, but feel empty within. You recognize when someone's natural way of showing love aligns with how you receive it best. Most importantly, you can communicate your needs clearly rather than hoping others will guess correctly. This self-awareness becomes your relationship compass, guiding decisions both large and small. When you know what truly matters to you, choosing becomes easier and regret becomes rarer. Part 2. Knowing your attachment style. When psychologist Mary Ainsworth studied toddlers in the 1970s, she made a discovery that would change how we understand love forever. She watched 18-month-olds play while their mothers briefly left the room. Some children explored confidently, welcomed mom back with joy, and quickly returned to playing. Others clung desperately, too anxious to explore. A third group seemed indifferent to their mother's return, continuing to play as if nothing happened. These patterns, Ainsworth realized, revealed something profound about how we form bonds throughout our entire lives. Your attachment style is like your emotional blueprint for relationships. Formed in your earliest years, it influences how you connect, communicate, and cope with closeness and distance. The secure children in Ainsworth's study grew up trusting that love is reliable and accessible. They learned that emotions can be shared safely and that people will respond with care. But not everyone gets this foundation. If your caregivers were inconsistent or overwhelmed, you might have developed an anxious attachment style. You learned to work hard for attention, to monitor others' moods carefully, and to worry that love might disappear. This shows up in adult relationships as a need for constant reassurance and a fear of abandonment. Those with avoidant attachment often had caregivers who discouraged emotional expression or were emotionally unavailable. They learned early that independence equals safety. As adults, they value autonomy intensely and may feel suffocated by too much closeness, even when they deeply want connection. A smaller group develops disorganized attachment when caregivers are frightening or chaotic. These individuals learn that the person meant to provide safety might also be a source of threat, creating internal conflict about intimacy. Here's what matters most. None of these styles are permanent sentences. Neuroscientist Daniel Siegel's research shows our brains remain changeable throughout life. Secure relationships can literally rewire anxious or avoidant patterns. The key is recognizing your style without judgment, then choosing relationships and responses that gradually build security. Consider how understanding your attachment style changes everything. Instead of wondering why your partner needs space, you recognize their avoidant pattern and stop taking it personally. Instead of criticizing yourself for feeling clingy, you understand your anxious tendencies and communicate your needs directly rather than through indirect protests. The goal isn't perfection, but awareness. When you know your patterns, you can choose your responses rather than simply reacting from old programming. Part 3. Breaking old patterns. When Sarah found herself having the same fight with her partner for the third time that month, she realized something deeper was happening. The surface issue, who would handle the groceries, wasn't really about groceries at all. It was about feeling heard, valued, and prioritized. Sound familiar? Most relationship struggles aren't about the immediate trigger, but about patterns we've carried for years, often without realizing it. Dr. John Gottman's research with over 3,000 couples revealed that 69% of relationship conflicts are perpetual. They keep coming back in different forms. The couples who thrive aren't those without patterns. They're the ones who recognize their cycles and consciously choose different responses. Sarah's grocery argument was actually a replay of childhood feelings about being overlooked, combined with her partner's defensive pattern learned from growing up in a critical household. Consider how Netflix transformed from a DVD by mail service to streaming giant. They didn't just change their technology, they completely rewired their thinking patterns. The same principle applies to relationships. Breaking old patterns requires recognizing them first, then making deliberate choices to respond differently. The most common relationship patterns include the pursue-withdraw cycle, where one person seeks connection while the other needs space, creating escalating tension. There's also the criticism-defensiveness loop, where complaints trigger protective responses that fuel more complaints. Sue Johnson's research in emotionally focused therapy shows these patterns aren't character flaws. They're survival strategies that once protected us, but now create distance. The good news? Patterns can be interrupted. Start by noticing your early warning signs. Maybe your chest tightens, your voice gets sharper, or you feel that familiar urge to withdraw. These physical cues often appear before conscious awareness kicks in. Try the pause and name technique. When you notice your warning signs, take 3 breaths and say, "I'm feeling triggered right now." This simple acknowledgement creates space between stimulus and response, the space where choice lives. Research shows even a 6-second pause can prevent the emotional flooding that makes constructive conversation impossible. Remember, changing patterns requires patience with yourself. You're literally rewiring neural pathways that have been active for years. Each time you choose awareness over reaction, you're building new relationship muscles. The goal isn't perfection, but progress, replacing automatic responses with conscious choices that serve connection rather than protection. Part 4. Embracing vulnerability. When Netflix's Culture document went viral in 2009, one line stood out among Silicon Valley executives. "You're not family here, we're a team." But it was what Netflix didn't publish that proved most revealing. According to former employees, CEO Reed Hastings regularly shared his own failures in all-hands meetings, admitting when he'd made hiring mistakes, revealing moments when he'd felt overwhelmed by rapid growth, and openly discussing times when his decisions had hurt the company. This wasn't corporate theater. It was calculated vulnerability that created what Harvard Business School's Francis Fry calls psychological safety at scale. The data behind this approach is compelling. Google's Project Aristotle, which analyzed hundreds of teams to identify what made them most effective, found that psychological safety, the belief that you can speak up without risk of punishment or humiliation, was the single strongest predictor of team performance. More than talent, resources, or clear goals, teams needed members who felt safe being vulnerable. This mirrors what happens in our personal relationships. Research from the University of Texas shows that couples who practice emotional transparency, sharing fears, insecurities, and genuine feelings, report 23% higher relationship satisfaction than those who maintain emotional distance. Yet most of us operate like Fort Knox when it comes to our inner experiences. The problem isn't that we don't want connection. It's that vulnerability triggers what neuroscientists call our threat detection system. When we consider sharing something personal, our brain interprets this as potential danger. Will they judge me? Use this against me later? Think less of me? These aren't irrational fears. They're survival mechanisms that once kept our ancestors alive in small tribes where rejection meant death. But here's what changes everything. Vulnerability is contagious in the best possible way. When someone shares something real, others almost always reciprocate. Brené Brown's research reveals that people who receive vulnerability tend to respond with their own openness within minutes. It's as if authenticity gives others permission to remove their masks too. Start small. Instead of "I'm fine," try "I'm actually feeling pretty overwhelmed today." Instead of pretending you have all the answers, admit when you're uncertain. Watch what happens next. Most people don't see these moments as weakness. They see them as refreshing honesty in a world full of performance. The strongest relationships aren't built on perfection. They're built on the courage to be imperfect together. That courage starts with a single honest sentence. Chapter 3. The Art of Boundaries and Trust. Part 1. Drawing Your Safe Circle. When Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella took the helm in 2014, the company was hemorrhaging talent and market share. His first major change wasn't about technology or strategy. It was about boundaries. He instituted no meeting Fridays and required managers to respect employee time outside work hours. Within 2 years, employee satisfaction soared 20%, and Microsoft's stock price doubled. This wasn't coincidence. It was the power of healthy boundaries creating space for people to thrive. The most successful relationships operate like well-designed buildings. They need walls, not to keep people apart, but to create structure where meaningful connection can happen. Without walls, a house collapses. Without boundaries, relationships crumble under pressure, resentment, and misunderstanding. Research from Dr. John Gottman's lab reveals that couples who maintain clear boundaries around personal space, time, and emotional energy report 40% higher relationship satisfaction than those who don't. The same principle applies whether you're dealing with your mother-in-law, your best friend, or your romantic partner. Think of boundaries as the rules of engagement that make relationships feel safe. When Netflix founder Reed Hastings implemented his famous keeper test culture, employees initially panicked, but the clear expectations actually reduced workplace anxiety because everyone knew where they stood. The same clarity transforms personal relationships. Your safe circle isn't about building walls. It's about creating a space where both people can be authentic without fear. Sarah, a marketing executive from Portland, learned this after her sister consistently borrowed money without paying it back. Instead of continuing to resent the situation, Sarah created what she calls her yes and no list. She could say yes to emotional support, babysitting, and family dinners. She said no to financial loans. The relationship improved immediately because both sisters knew the parameters. The warning signs of weak boundaries are surprisingly obvious once you notice them. You feel drained after certain interactions. You say yes when you mean no. You feel responsible for other people's emotions or problems. You avoid difficult conversations until resentment builds. Creating your safe circle starts with identifying your non-negotiables. What behaviors, requests, or situations consistently leave you feeling depleted? Write them down. Then practice responses. I care about you, but I can't lend money right now. Or, I need some quiet time before we discuss this. The magic happens when you realize that respecting your own boundaries teaches others to respect them too. Strong boundaries don't push people away. They attract the right people closer. Part 2. Learning when to say yes or no. Sarah Chen learned the hard way about the cost of saying yes when she meant no. As a rising marketing executive at a Fortune 500 company, she volunteered for every additional project, attended every optional meeting, and never declined social invitations from colleagues. Within 18 months, she was promoted and completely burned out. Her relationships suffered because she showed up physically, but was emotionally drained. The wake-up call came when her best friend confronted her. You're here, but you're not really here anymore. Research from Dr. Henry Cloud reveals that people who struggle with boundaries often fear rejection more than they value their own well-being. Sarah's story reflects what psychologists call agreeableness anxiety, the persistent worry that saying no will damage relationships. Paradoxically, the opposite proves true. Studies tracking workplace relationships over 5 years found that employees who set clear limits earned more respect from colleagues than those who accepted every request. The science behind healthy refusal lies in what relationship expert John Gottman calls emotional banking. Every interaction either makes deposits or withdrawals from your relationship account. When you say yes reluctantly, you make a withdrawal because resentment builds. When you decline respectfully while offering alternatives, you make a deposit because you demonstrate integrity and consideration for both parties' needs. Warren Buffett famously said, "The difference between successful people and really successful people is that really successful people say no to almost everything." This principle extends beyond business into personal relationships. Consider Maria Rodriguez, who transformed her family dynamics by learning selective agreement. Previously, she hosted every holiday gathering, organized every birthday party, and managed every family crisis. Her siblings took her availability for granted until she started saying, "I'd love to help, but I'm not available this time," Let me know how else we might share this responsibility. Initially, her family pushed back. Some members accused her of being selfish. However, within 6 months, her siblings began contributing more actively to family events. The quality of their gatherings improved because responsibility was shared, and Maria participated with genuine enthusiasm rather than obligatory exhaustion. The key insight from attachment research is that saying no authentically strengthens secure relationships while filtering out unhealthy dynamics. People who respect your boundaries are typically those worth building deeper connections with. Those who pressure you after a polite decline often reveal their own relationship patterns. Practicing selective agreement requires developing what psychologists call response flexibility. Instead of automatic agreement, pause and ask yourself, does this request align with my values and current priorities? Can I fulfill this request wholeheartedly? What am I saying no to if I say yes to this? The most effective refusals acknowledge the request, express appreciation, and offer alternatives when possible. I appreciate you thinking of me for this project. My current commitments won't allow me to give it the attention it deserves. Would John be a good fit? This approach maintains relationships while protecting your resources for what matters most. Part 3. Rebuilding Broken Trust. When Netflix CEO Reed Hastings publicly apologized in 2011 for the Quickster debacle, he faced 1 million canceled subscriptions and a plummeting stock price. His company had broken faith with customers by splitting DVD and streaming services without warning. What followed became a masterclass in trust repair, not through empty promises, but through consistent action over months and years. Today, Netflix stands stronger than ever because Hastings understood a fundamental truth. Broken trust, while painful, can be rebuilt into something more resilient than what existed before. The path back from broken trust rarely begins with the person who caused the damage. Research from the Gottman Institute shows that successful reconciliation starts when the injured party feels truly heard and understood. This means the person seeking forgiveness must resist the urge to explain, justify, or minimize what happened. Instead, they need to sit with the discomfort of someone else's pain. Dr. Aaron Lazer's groundbreaking work on apologies identifies 4 essential components: acknowledgement of what happened, acceptance of responsibility, expression of genuine remorse, and commitment to repair. Notice what's missing from this list. Explanations. When Southwest Airlines faced massive flight cancellations in December 2022, CEO Bob Jordan didn't lead with technical details about their scheduling system. He started with "we messed up" and outlined concrete steps for improvement. The most challenging aspect of rebuilding trust isn't the initial apology. It's the months of consistent behavior that follow. Think of trust like a bank account that's gone into overdraft. Small, regular deposits eventually restore the balance, but it takes patience and persistence. A friend who repeatedly canceled plans can't rebuild reliability with one kept commitment. It requires showing up consistently over time. Setting new boundaries becomes crucial during this rebuilding phase. The hurt party needs space to process and heal, while the person who caused harm must demonstrate change through actions, not words. This might mean accepting limited communication initially, or agreeing to new relationship structures that feel safer for everyone involved. Forgiveness doesn't require forgetting, a common misconception that actually hinders healing. Remembering what happened helps both parties recognize growth and prevents similar situations. The goal isn't to return to the original relationship, but to build something new, informed by experience and strengthened by vulnerability. Perhaps most importantly, both people must choose to participate in the repair process. Trust can't be rebuilt unilaterally. It requires the injured party to remain open to change while the other person demonstrates that change through consistent action. When both commit to this difficult work, they often discover something unexpected. Relationships that survive betrayal and emerge stronger possess a depth that untested bonds rarely achieve. Part 4. Growing Together Through Honesty. In the late 1990s, psychologist John Gottman made a startling discovery while observing thousands of couples in his research lab. He found that partners who thrived together weren't those who never disagreed, but those who had learned to be honest about difficult topics without destroying each other in the process. The couples who lasted decades had mastered what Gottman calls gentle startup, the ability to raise concerns with kindness rather than criticism. This distinction matters more than most people realize. When Sarah, a marketing executive, finally told her business partner that his constant interruptions during client meetings were undermining their presentations, she wasn't being mean. She was being honest in service of their shared success. But she chose her moment carefully. After a successful project wrap-up, not during a stressful deadline, she focused on specific behaviors rather than character flaws, saying, "When you jump in while I'm explaining the strategy, clients seem confused about who's leading, instead of, you always have to be the center of attention." The difference between brutal honesty and compassionate truth-telling lies in motivation and delivery. Brutal honesty often serves the speaker's need to vent frustration. Compassionate honesty serves the relationship's need to grow. Research by communication expert Marshall Rosenberg shows that when we express observations rather than evaluations, people are 70% more likely to hear our message without becoming defensive. Consider how vulnerability researcher Brené Brown describes the process in her studies of thousands of individuals. Those who build the strongest connections don't share everything at once. They practice what she calls graduated vulnerability, testing the waters with smaller truths before sharing deeper ones. When someone responds with empathy rather than judgment, trust deepens incrementally. The timing of honest conversations makes an enormous difference. Relationship therapist Sue Johnson found that partners in distress often choose the worst possible moments to share difficult truths, when emotions are already running high or during transitions and stress. The couples in her practice who learned to recognize these patterns began scheduling regular check-ins during calm moments, creating safe spaces for honest dialogue. What transforms honesty from a potential relationship destroyer into a growth catalyst is the underlying agreement that both people want to improve, not prove they're right. When Netflix CEO Reed Hastings instituted a culture of keeper test feedback, where employees regularly discuss what each person should start, stop, or continue doing, productivity improved because everyone understood the goal was collective success, not individual criticism. Growing together through honesty requires treating mistakes as data rather than disasters. When miscommunications happen, the question becomes, what can we learn from this instead of who's to blame? This shift in perspective transforms conflicts into opportunities for deeper understanding. The most honest relationships aren't perfect. They're adaptive. They're built by people who've learned to speak difficult truths with love, listen to feedback without defensiveness, and view each conversation as a chance to build something stronger than what existed before. Chapter 4. Turning Moments into Memories. Part 1. Creating Us Moments. When Amy and Marcus got married, they made what seemed like an impossible promise: to never let a Sunday pass without sharing one new thing they'd learned that week. 7 years later, their weekly tradition has become the foundation of their relationship. Not because learning is particularly romantic, but because those 20 minutes every Sunday created something uniquely theirs, a ritual that no one else shares. John Gottman's research with over 3,000 couples reveals that successful relationships aren't built on grand gestures or perfect compatibility. Instead, they thrive on what he calls emotional bank deposits, small, consistent moments of connection that accumulate over time. These couples understand something profound. Shared rituals create shared identity. Consider the Nakamura family in Portland, who turned their nightly dishwashing routine into story time. Each family member shares one highlight and one challenge from their day while washing up. What started as a practical necessity became their most treasured family tradition. Their teenage daughter now brings friends over specifically during dinner cleanup because that's when our family is most fun. The science behind these moments runs deeper than simple bonding. Research from UCLA's Center for Everyday Lives shows that families with consistent micro-rituals report 40% higher satisfaction in their relationships. These aren't elaborate ceremonies. They're intentional moments of togetherness woven into ordinary life. Dr. Sue Johnson's work with couples therapy reveals that successful relationships require accessible moments times when partners are emotionally present and engaged. The magic happens not in the activity itself, but in the predictable space it creates for connection. Whether it's Saturday morning pancakes, evening walks, or text check-ins during lunch breaks, these rituals become containers for intimacy. The key lies in novelty within familiarity. Research psychologist Arthur Aaron found that couples who regularly introduce small new elements into established routines maintain higher relationship satisfaction. This might mean trying a new coffee shop for your weekly catch-up, or adding a "what are you grateful for" question to bedtime conversations. What makes these moments stick? They're yours. When relationships face challenges, and they all do, these shared rituals become anchors. They remind us who we are together, separate from who we are apart. The Sunday learning session, the dishwashing stories, the morning text, these aren't just habits. They're the quiet architecture of lasting love. The question isn't whether you have time for these moments. You're already spending time together. The question is whether you're being intentional about creating something that belongs uniquely to your relationship. Part 2. Small habits, big changes. When marriage researcher John Gottman analyzed thousands of couples over decades, he discovered something that surprised even him. It wasn't the big romantic gestures that predicted relationship success. Instead, couples who stayed together had mastered what he called turning toward each other in tiny daily moments. The husband who looked up from his newspaper when his wife mentioned seeing a beautiful cardinal outside. The partner who asked, "How was your meeting?" and actually listened to the answer. These micro moments matter because they create what psychologists call emotional deposits in our relationship bank account. Each small positive interaction builds trust and connection, while missed opportunities slowly erode it. Think about your phone battery. It doesn't die from one big drain, but from countless small uses throughout the day. Consider the story of Sarah and Marcus, whose marriage nearly ended after 15 years. Their breakthrough didn't come from couples therapy or a romantic getaway. Instead, they committed to one simple habit: texting each other one thing they appreciated about their day together before bed. "Thank you for making coffee this morning," or "I loved hearing you laugh at that TV show." Within 3 months, their entire dynamic had shifted. The science behind this is compelling. Dr. Barbara Fredrickson's research shows that positive emotions compound over time, creating an upward spiral of connection. When we consistently express gratitude, offer support, or simply pay attention to our partner, we're literally rewiring our brains to notice more positive moments. The magic happens in something researchers call habit stacking. James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, suggests attaching new relationship habits to existing routines. After you pour your morning coffee, ask your partner about their day ahead. After you brush your teeth at night, share one thing you're grateful for about them. Start impossibly small. Dale Carnegie knew this when he advised people to begin with genuine interest in others, rather than trying to be interesting themselves. Choose one micro habit you can do consistently for 30 days. Maybe it's putting your phone down when your partner speaks, or sending a midday thinking of you text, or saying thank you for ordinary things like taking out trash. The couples who transform their relationships understand that love isn't just a feeling, it's a practice. Each small positive interaction is a vote for the relationship you want to build. What small vote will you cast today? Part 3. The Power of Apology and Forgiveness. When researcher and therapist Harriet Lerner was asked about the most powerful force in healing relationships, she didn't mention therapy techniques or communication strategies. She said one word: apology. Yet most of us butcher our apologies so badly that they often make things worse than staying silent. The difference between a genuine apology and a hollow one became clear to me through watching 2 public figures handle their mistakes. When chef Anthony Bourdain criticized fellow chefs early in his career, he later wrote detailed, specific acknowledgments of how his words caused harm. He took full responsibility without making excuses or deflecting blame. Compare this to politicians who offer the classic non-apology. If anyone was offended, this places responsibility on the offended party rather than the person who caused harm. Dr. Aaron Lazare, who studied apologies for decades at the University of Massachusetts, identified 4 essential components of effective apologies. They must acknowledge the offense specifically, accept responsibility completely, express genuine remorse, and offer appropriate restitution. Miss any of these elements, and your apology becomes just another disappointment. The couple's researcher John Gottman discovered that successful long-term relationships handle repair attempts differently than failing ones. Partners in thriving relationships don't wait for perfect conditions to apologize. They interrupt their own defensiveness to say, "Wait, I'm being harsh here," even in the middle of heated discussions. They understand that being right matters less than being connected. But what about forgiveness? Psychologist Everett Worthington's research at Virginia Commonwealth University shows that forgiveness isn't about excusing harmful behavior or reconciling with unsafe people. True forgiveness is replacing negative emotions with positive ones for your own well-being. It's a gift you give yourself, not necessarily the other person. The most profound example I've encountered comes from Eva Kor, an Auschwitz survivor who chose to forgive Nazi doctor Josef Mengele. She didn't do this to excuse his actions or because he deserved it. She forgave him because carrying hatred was destroying her own life. Her forgiveness freed her while changing nothing about his guilt. Forgiveness becomes toxic when it rushes past accountability or enables continued harm. Healthy forgiveness often requires time, boundaries, and sometimes distance. The goal isn't to restore every relationship, but to restore your own peace. When you combine genuine apology with healthy forgiveness, something remarkable happens. Relationships don't just return to their previous state, they often become stronger than before the rupture occurred. The scar tissue of trust, when properly healed, creates stronger bonds than existed originally. Part 4. Celebrating every step. When Google employees receive their famous Peer Bonus Awards, small monetary gifts accompanied by heartfelt notes from colleagues, something interesting happens. Recipients don't just feel good about the money, they feel seen, valued, and motivated to keep contributing. The magic isn't in the dollar amount, but in the recognition itself. This practice has helped Google maintain employee satisfaction rates that consistently outpace industry averages, proving that celebration, even in small doses, creates profound change. Most relationships operate on a deficit model. We notice what's wrong, what's missing, what needs fixing. We save celebration for the big moments, anniversaries, promotions, major achievements. But research from positive psychology shows that couples who actively celebrate small everyday victories report 23% higher relationship satisfaction than those who only acknowledge major milestones. Consider Sarah and Marcus, a couple who started what they called Tuesday wins. Every Tuesday evening, they'd share one small victory from their week. Marcus celebrated Sarah's decision to speak up in a difficult meeting. Sarah celebrated Marcus for remembering to pick up coffee on his way home. Nothing earth-shattering, but after 6 months, their relationship had transformed. They began looking for positive moments to share rather than problems to solve. The neuroscience supports this approach. When we celebrate, our brains release dopamine, which strengthens memory formation. We literally wire ourselves to remember positive experiences more vividly. Dr. Shelley Gable's research at UC Santa Barbara found that how couples respond to good news matters more than how they handle bad news. Active, enthusiastic responses to small wins predict relationship longevity better than conflict resolution skills. Micro-celebrations don't require grand gestures. Netflix co-founder Reed Hastings credits his company's culture partly to their practice of celebrating keeper moments, recognizing when team members demonstrate exceptional judgment in small daily decisions. They understood that culture builds through accumulated moments of recognition, not annual reviews. Try implementing what therapists call appreciation flooding. Set aside 5 minutes weekly to share 3 specific things you noticed and appreciated about someone close to you. Not generic praise like "you're great," but specific observations. "I noticed how patient you were with the customer service representative today." The Gottman Institute recommends a 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative interactions in thriving relationships. This doesn't mean false positivity. It means actively seeking authentic moments worth celebrating. When your partner attempts to connect, even imperfectly, that's worth acknowledging. When your friend tries something new despite fear, that deserves recognition. Real celebration requires presence. Put down the phone. Make eye contact. Let the moment expand rather than rushing toward the next task. These small acts of recognition become the foundation upon which deeper intimacy and trust are built, one moment at a time.